and he's telling me, like, the sales just aren't coming in. And I'm looking at the numbers going, we are producing the phone calls, man. We are producing the traffic. You're ranking better than you ever have. All the awesome details were happening with this guy. In fact, like I said, he was a case study for us because we were just doing so well. But we got into listening to some of the phone calls and found out that
again, we're sharing some stories and talking about some of the biggest lessons learned. Now, for example, I know one of the things that happens to surface all the time as you're running marketing campaigns and you're just doing various things is when you are spending good money on your marketing and you're not seeing the results, meaning the phone calls aren't coming in, people are not coming into the office, you're not getting the number of visitors to your website, the leads aren't coming in, and the sales aren't closing nearly to the degree that you would like, and you're just not getting that return on investment. Where do you point your finger? Where do you go? You're spending a lot of money. You're not getting the results that you want, not seeing the return on investment. Where initially would you point your finger? Where do you kind of retreat to? Where do you go to start getting some answers and trying to figure out where to go to kind of fix this thing?
Good question, Terry. Usually when we're sitting back and doing the work, there's this panel in front of us. And we usually go, woo, what does this button do? No, I'm just kidding. That's not how it happens.
Okay, let's pull this lever.
Yeah. No. In fact, we should do a segment sometime on funny stories. I could tell you some funny stories. What's this button do? In the last episode, we mentioned that it's important to do tracking, yes. Right? And you can't improve what you're not measuring. So I would, first of all, counsel to people, because this is one of the very first things we always do with any new client that we're working with is tracking in place? Do we have the right metrics set up? Are the goals and conversion pieces set up for us to track everything? Because, again, and I'll say it again, by and large, it's a big data collection game that we play. And you can make all the I think and I feel conversations you want, but if the facts are different, you got to follow the facts. That's the science, right? Speaking of tracking, there are lots of ways to do tracking. And a really common one I would make sure everybody uses, because it just applies everywhere, is Google Analytics. Mm-hmm. Plugs into so many things. Now, I'm not saying it's the only one.
We've talked about them in the past.
But Google Analytics, by and large, applies in almost every case. But there's other gaps that you can fill in. Like there are some really good conversion rate optimization software pieces you can have that'll help you determine what are elements on your website that can help a conversion get better, a conversion rate, so that you don't need more visitors. Maybe you just can get more of the visitors you already have to take the action you're asking them to. Another piece, one that's important to us, is call tracking. Because if calls are a big metric for us, then how are we going to track accurately? I'm not saying there aren't roundabout ways, but how do we accurately track calls? And so call tracking is a big deal. And so I actually have a situation. We were dealing with a plumber in North Carolina. Okay. And I think he was a little frustrated. He was kind of one of those, once bitten, twice shy kind of guys. And so he was spending, before he started with us, about twice as much on SEO and about 3 times as much on paid ads. More than he needed. That's the point. But his tracking wasn't in place. And after we had produced some success, he's literally a case study client. Like, we're killing it, at least from our perspective. He calls me up to say, I can't do this anymore. I think we're going to cancel. And I'm blown away. Like, I'm on the floor at this point. Through tracking, call tracking, and through our Google Analytics, we discovered what an issue was, and once it was fixed, it was amazing. Things just took off. But what ended up happening real specifically was that through call tracking, we could, in certain states with call tracking, you can let the other party know, and you'll hear it sometimes like, hey, this call may be monitored for quality assurance or something
training
generic
purposes.
Like that, or for training purposes, right? Whatever. And so the calls are being recorded, and he's telling me, like, the sales just aren't coming in. And I'm looking at the numbers going, we are producing the phone calls, man. We are producing the traffic. You're ranking better than you ever have. All the awesome details were happening with this guy. In fact, like I said, he was a case study for us because we were just doing so well. But we got into listening to some of the phone calls and found out that some of his receptionists were not allowing the sales process to happen. And it was a really interesting situation simply because these receptionists, there were two of them in particular, really good friends with the company owner. And he would never in a million years believe they were sabotaging any of the sales calls. But as we got to, they didn't, and I don't think they knew that we had call tracking happening. So we got back through in a month and found out that more than 3/4 of the phone calls that came in, they were just saying, you got the wrong number, or go, it sounded like they were busy doing something else.
I see.
And really not saying, yeah, we'd love to help you. What's the problem? Can we send a technician over, or a plumber, or what have you, a service repairman? And they just weren't making that happen. So, but when the third receptionist lady was answering, she was helping sales go through, and that's how they were even surviving. But once we presented that data, the facts, not the I think and I feels, because according to him, he didn't think we were doing a good job. And according to us, we were killing it. So who's right?
Yes.
Well, the data tells us who's right. And so when we showed him the data and showed him the phone calls, I think he was beside himself. He let those two girls go. I think it was a really I'm so glad I'm not him doing those conversations. But once he had those conversations and he got two new receptionists in, all of a sudden sales just started cruising. He went from 3 service vans that would make, calls to houses to 8 in about 2 months because he was so overbooked. Because he was so overbooked, he could raise his rates just a little bit. We were able to decrease his Google ad spend from over $20,000 a month down to $8,000 a month. But he was seeing like 8 or 9 times the conversions he was prior. I estimate that his ad spend went up so high because he was trying to hurry and get more calls that these people were destroying. Tracking matters. That's the point. Tracking matters. And to kind of give you a neat piece behind that, after working with them for about after that, he'd stuck with us for about 9 months at that point before he called us up to say, I can't do this anymore. It's not working.
Right.
Fixed it. And then 18 months later after that, roughly, in the city he's in, there was a large corporate plumbing HVAC company that bought him out because they were tired of being beat by him. Whatever he was doing was working. He wasn't telling them. So they said, that's fine. If you can't beat him, join him, right? So then they bought him out at a reasonable sum, and he decided to exit. I don't know. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but that's the only reason we're not working with him anymore.
Well, good for you. That's incredible. Well, when I hear that story, a couple things that come to my mind, lessons learned, are obviously make sure you've got your tracking and your marketing well documented so you can make good decisions there, certainly. But sometimes it's not all about just increasing revenue. Sometimes it's about increasing or improving your profitability, lowering your expenses, lowering your cost to acquire those phone calls or those conversions, or lowering your ad spend. Is there a more efficient way to use the money? And it sounds like that's, in essence, what you guys did there.
Yeah. So, and I think that there's a couple different thoughts behind this. One is, and we get this all the time, I just need to increase my traffic. Why? So that I can grow my revenue. Well, what if we didn't have to grow your traffic at all? What if we could just increase the number of people that could follow the call to action to become a conversion from the traffic you already have? And then what if we could also, as a third step, maybe it's like another enhanced piece, what if we could get the people who are spending money with your company or agency or store, whatever it might be, what if we got those people who are already spending money to just spend a little bit more when they spent the money? So there's increased traffic is step 1, increased conversions is step 2, and increase the revenue per transaction is step 3. And then I'd even argue there's a step 4, and that's getting a repeat rate.
Exactly.
So, and we can talk about those another time, but something to consider.
Awesome.